Picture this. You're taking a walk right beside a quiet, pristine river. The only thing you can hear is the water rushing over the stones. The air is cool, completely undisturbed. And then, suddenly, you spot something catching the sunlight in the water. You reach down, you pick it up, and you realize it's gold. And we're not talking about some tiny, microscopic speck here. We are talking about a piece large enough to change your life forever. Now, what if I told you that that single, solitary discovery triggered one of the absolute largest mass migrations in human history?
It sounds crazy now, right? But within just a few months of this discovery, hundreds of thousands of people literally walked away from their entire lives. I mean, they abandoned steady jobs, stepped away from their families, and went on journeys that honestly defied logic. They sailed across vast, treacherous oceans, crossed absolutely deadly deserts. They risked everything they had, including their own lives, for one single intoxicating dream. They were going to get unbelievably rich.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the California Gold Rush, the discovery that made America rich forever. So let's set the stage a bit. We're traveling back in time to Northern California. The year is 1848. At this point in history, it is a remote, rugged frontier that very few Americans had ever even laid eyes on. I mean, it took months just to get a letter out there. There were no major cities, barely any carved roads, just a tiny population of indigenous peoples, Mexican ranchers, and a handful of American settlers. It was quiet, it was isolated, but hidden right beneath its rushing rivers lay a staggering fortune just waiting to be pulled from the earth. Chapter 1: The Secret at Sutter's Mill. Okay, let's trace exactly how this explosion of wealth actually began. It all kicks off on a freezing morning, January 24th, 1848. You've got this carpenter named James W. Marshall, and he's inspecting a sawmill owned by a businessman named John Sutter on the American River. So while he's checking the water flow, Marshall notices these unusual yellow flakes sparkling in the sunlight. He does the classic frontier tests, biting the metal, hammering it, and the verdict was absolutely undeniable. It was real gold. Now, initially, Sutter and Marshall tried to keep the whole thing completely quiet. Sutter was terrified all his workers would just abandon his agricultural empire. But come on, a secret of this magnitude, there is no way it stays hidden. Within weeks, rumors started leaking out. And the true breaking point happens when a merchant named Sam Brannan literally walks through the streets of San Francisco holding up a glass vial of gold, just shouting at the top of his lungs about the discovery at the American River. By late 1848, newspapers across the entire continent were confirming this unbelievable truth. But the catalyst that pushed the entire nation over the edge, well, that came straight from the top. When President James K. Polk officially announced the findings to Congress in his State of the Union address, it completely changed the game. It was no longer some frontier myth or a wild rumor printed in a local paper. It was a presidential guarantee. The actual president of the United States had just told the country that the gold fields in California were richer than anyone could have ever imagined. And honestly, that was all anyone needed to hear. This official stamp of approval triggered an absolute nationwide madness that we all know today as gold fever. Chapter 2: The 49er Mass Migration. What's really staggering about all of this is the sheer diversity of the people who caught the fever. We're talking farmers walking away from half-harvested crops, blacksmiths simply putting down their hammers, teachers, doctors, sailors, merchants. They dropped absolutely everything. Get this, entire crews would abandon their ships the very moment they docked in San Francisco harbor. They left hundreds of these massive ghost vessels to just rot in the bay because literally no one was left to sail them. Even soldiers deserted their posts. People from every imaginable walk of life traded their comfortable, predictable situations for this desperate, chaotic frontier. And this mass exodus culminated in a mind-blowing number: 80,000. By the year 1849, 80,000 people converged on a territory that, just a few months prior, was practically empty. Because of that specific year, these fortune seekers became forever cemented in history as the 49ers. So this wasn't just a slow trickle of pioneers heading west. No, this was a human tidal wave crashing right into the western coast. Now, getting to that gold, well, that was an absolute nightmare. The routes to California were unbelievably treacherous. Just imagine your choices back then. Option 1, you spend 6 agonizing months sailing all the way around the stormy, freezing tip of South America at Cape Horn. Option 2, sail to Central America, hop off the boat, and try to cross the insanely dangerous Panama jungle on foot or by canoe. That route was famously lethal, just packed with malaria, yellow fever, and cholera. Or option 3, You pack up a heavy wagon and you walk 2,000 miles across deadly, unforgiving deserts and towering mountain ranges in sweltering heat. These were horrific, grueling journeys. Tragically, thousands of people died on the trail, never even making it to the California border.
Chapter 3: Reality of the Gold Fields.
So here is the ultimate twist of the entire gold rush. Who actually made the money? All those newspaper stories on the East Coast, they promised easy wealth just sitting right there on the ground. But the reality was absolutely brutal. Most miners worked from sunrise to sunset, standing knee-deep in freezing mountain runoff, desperately sifting through just endless pans of sand and gravel. They faced scurvy, rampant disease, bitter disappointment. The stark truth is, most of them found almost nothing. They rarely struck it rich. The true wealth wasn't in the river at all. It was in the supply chain. You see, merchants quickly realized that selling a basic shovel for the modern equivalent of $100 or charging $3 for a single egg was way more profitable than freezing in the water. These savvy entrepreneurs built massive empires and accumulated unimaginable wealth entirely off the desperate miners. And to support this explosive, desperate population, these completely lawless mining towns seemingly appeared out of thin air almost overnight. They were built out of canvas tents and rough wood, and they all shared some pretty grim features. They were instantly filled with gambling halls and saloons, which were entirely designed to separate a miner from whatever tiny bit of gold dust he actually managed to find that week. General stores charged totally extortionate prices just for basic survival goods, and when you mix all that desperation, expensive living, alcohol, and completely shattered dreams into one muddy camp, well, violence wasn't just common, it was an everyday expectation. Chapter 4: Building Modern America. So because of this sheer, totally unprecedented volume of migration, California's population exploded with unbelievable speed. Normally, a territory had to go through this decades-long process of population growth and building infrastructure before it could even think about petitioning for statehood. But California? It grew so incredibly fast that it completely bypassed those standard timelines. It was officially admitted as the 31st state in the Union in 1850. That is a geopolitical leap that permanently shifted the balance of power in the United States. And what's truly fascinating is looking at exactly who made up this brand new state. Because it wasn't just Americans moving west. The promise of gold triggered a truly global migration. Fortune seekers poured in from Europe, Latin America, Australia, and Asia, particularly from China. This instant massive influx of international cultures and languages immediately transformed California into one of the most wonderfully diverse regions in all of North America. It literally laid the cultural foundation that defines the state even today. So, the lasting legacy of the gold rush didn't really lie in the pockets of those transient miners. It was the permanent infrastructure they left behind. I mean, this massive influx of people demanded deep water ports to receive goods, which essentially turned San Francisco from a sleepy little village into a booming metropolis. It sparked this urgent need for new roads and eventually led to the monumental Transcontinental Railroad, finally connecting this isolated state to the rest of the country. It birthed huge banking institutions like Wells Fargo and iconic businesses like Levi Strauss, who literally invented durable blue jeans for the very miners digging in the dirt. This foundation rapidly accelerated America's westward expansion and massively strengthened the entire nation's economy. As we draw this explainer to a close, we really have to acknowledge a pretty tragic historical irony. Most of the 49ers returned home poorer than when they arrived. Despite all the immense physical risks, the abandoned families, the deadly diseases, the grueling labor, the vast majority of these individuals never found their fortune. Yet, through their collective struggle, through all their heartbreak and sacrifice, they effectively built modern California from the ground up. It really makes you think, doesn't it? One single discovery at Sutter's Mill sparked one of history's greatest mass migrations, rapidly expanded the American frontier, and helped transform the United States into a global economic powerhouse. Sometimes history doesn't actually begin with sweeping armies or monumental presidential decrees. Sometimes it just begins with a few glittering pieces of gold in a quiet river. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up. If a few shiny flakes could drive hundreds of thousands of people to risk absolutely everything, what modern-day gold rush are we chasing today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.